Jessica Davis and I were given the Diagnostic Evaluation of Language Variation, or also known as the DELV. And today we are going to tell you a little bit about this diagnostic test. The purpose of the DELV Norm Reference Edition is that it is used to identify speech and language disorders in children. It allows clinicians to assess the aspects of language that are common to all varieties of English and critical to the development of language competence. Clinicians are also able to identify a speech and language disorder in the child regardless of the variety of English that the child speaks, and that's why this is such a good test to use. The age range that this test is used for is that it can be used for children between the ages of 4 years, 0 months, to children of ages 9 years and 11 months. This test is appropriate when English is the first and primary language spoken by the child. And it takes approximately 45 minutes to give this test and about 10 to 15 minutes to score the test. The DELV has 4 different domains within the test. It has syntax, a pragmatics, a semantics, and a phonology domain. And all these domains are used to assess language skills and abilities that allow the clinician to distinguish children whose language and/or phonology is disordered or delayed from the children who are developing language and/or phonology normally. The results of assessing these domains provide the clinicians with a linguistically sound foundation for remediation. The syntax domain contains 3 subdomains. They are WH questions, passives, and articles. This domain assesses a child's ability to understand WH movement, example, WH question words and sentences, multiple kinds of passive sentence constructions, and correct use of articles. This is an example of a WH question that is in the picture manual, and is what you would tell the child is that this mom didn't know how to bake a cake. She saw a TV program about cooking, and she learned to make a lovely cake with pudding mix. How did the mom learn what to bake? And the correct answer that you would be looking for from the child is that the mom learned to bake on a TV or on a show. The second domain is the pragmatic domain, and it also contains 3 subdomains. They are communicative role-taking, short narratives, and question asking. This domain assesses one's capability to take someone else's view in speech acts, discourse skills, and WH question asking. And here is an example of communicative role-taking, which is under the pragmatic domain that we retrieved from the picture manual also. And you would tell the child to look at what's happening here. Look at the boy. What is the boy telling his mother? The correct answer, or the correct response that you would want the child to say is that the mom, the girl fell off her bike. Look, she's hurt. For his mom to go help the girl, and she is crying. All of these could be our correct responses, and the main thing is that you just want the child to report what the boy witnessed. And the third domain under the DELV is semantics domain, and this contains 4 subdomains: verb contrast, preposition contrast, quantifiers, and fast mapping. This domain assesses the child's vocabulary organization and ability to contrast verbs and prepositions under the verb contrast and preposition contrast, and understand quantifiers and learn new meanings from sentence context, which is the fast mapping. And the example of this, of a verb contrast, is showing the child the picture of this baby, and you would tell the child, the baby is not slicing the bread, and the correct answer that you are looking for is that you want the child to tell you the baby is breaking the bread apart, tearing it up, crumbling it, or ripping it. Because you pretty much want the child to tell you the opposite of slicing the bread. So incorrect responses, you would not want the child to say the baby is sitting or the baby is wearing a blue outfit or anything like that. You're just looking for the opposite of the baby is not slicing. So now Jess will continue talking about these domains.
Okay, and the next domain that we're going to talk about is the phonology domain. And this domain focuses on the child's formation of consonant clusters in the initial and medial position of words produced in the context of a sentence. And so this is an example from the phonology section. And the directions you would read to the child during this section are, I'm going to show you some more pictures and tell you what I see. Then I want you to say exactly what I say. Let's try some. I see a dusty table. You say it. And you're listening for the ST sound in dusty. And another one you might say is, I see a baby in a crib. You say it. And in that example, you're listening for the CR cluster in crib. Okay, and the scores that are obtained from this test include scaled scores, percentile bands, composite score, percentile ranks, and test age equivalents. Okay, and the general scoring procedures, the items should be administered just as they are shown in the record form. So you don't want to stray a lot from the directions that are given. They're very specifically worded for the way you're supposed to say them. Any of the items may be repeated one time if the child either doesn't respond or requests a repetition from you. If the child interrupts the clinician during the administration of an item, the clinician should tell the child, wait until I finish the directions and then start the prompt back from the beginning. All of the domains should be given in full. The only exception is the pragmatics domain, and that one can be discontinued after item 12 if the child hasn't produced at least one question. And specifically, each item includes several examples of the most common responses on the record form. So after the child responds, the clinician should circle the response that corresponds with what the child says. And if there's not a response on the record form that seems similar to what the child says, then you should just write down what the child does say in response. So generally what is considered correct on the record form is the response listed under A. So if the child's response matches what option A says, then it will be considered correct and they'll receive a score of either 2 or 1 depending on which domain we're in, whichever one's considered correct. And if they say anything other than the option listed under A, then they will receive a score of 0. The raw score is obtained by adding the scores from each item in the domain, and raw scores will be obtained both from the overall domains and from each subdomain. Alright. So our impressions from this test, it is a well-known measure for English-speaking children with dialectal differences. That's one of the main features of this test, and what sets it apart from other tests is that it emphasizes differences versus disorders, and helps us identify things that are dialectal or whether they are a potential problem. And it tries to challenge the negative connotations associated with African American English. The reliability and validity of this test have been proven and through several methods. The reliability evidence was based on test-retest stability, internal consistency, and interscore reliability. And the validity was based on test content, response process, internal structure, relationships to other variables, and clinical validity statistics. Now we're going to pass out the handouts that we have for you. And here we have a list of our references. Okay, well, thank you for listening to our presentation on the DELF, and I hope that you've learned something.